John found himself once again seated in a chair before his father's enormous desk.
"May I go now, Father?"
he said while leaning forward in his chair.
"No, you may not,"
came the firm response.
"John, I hardly know what to do with you. You've been on 5 voyages with me and done absolutely nothing."
John slouched back. He'd heard this before.
"I've done everything to try to make you successful like Mr. Almaraz of Spain. You had a great job handling his accounts, and what did you do? Walked out just because you thought it was too boring."
Now John began scuffing his feet on the desk in front of him.
"I suppose you'd rather be reading one of those books about how everything would be great if everyone could just sit around eating and drinking all the time. Well, let me tell you, son, that's not the real world. In the real world, real people work real hard for real money or they end up real poor. Do you understand?"
John knew there'd be more, unless he acted as if he was sorry.
"I'm sorry, Father. I know I've disappointed you. It's not that I don't appreciate all you've done, it's just that I don't think I'm cut out to be a sea captain like you."
His father let out a sigh.
"John, I don't expect you to be a captain like me, but I do expect you to prove yourself hard-working at whatever you do."
"Yes, Father, I'll try harder."
"Now then,"
his father continued,
"I have another opportunity for you. My friend, Joseph Manistee, has offered to take you to Jamaica to help him manage his sugar plantation. If you do prove yourself, John, in 4 or 5 years you could find yourself very wealthy and in charge of your own plantation."
John didn't mind the thought of having plenty of money to spend.
"You sail in 3 weeks, John. And in case you're wondering how to spend your time before you leave, I have a job for you."
His father explained the details of a business matter he wanted John to take care of in Kent, a nearby town.
"Oh, and John, I want you to visit your mother's cousins, the Catlets, while you're out there. They have been wanting to meet with you."
2 weeks later, John was on a snowy road near Kent. He'd finished the errand for his father and was eager to get on board the ship for Jamaica. The only thing left to do was to pay a quick visit to the Catlets. New fallen snow made it impossible for John to reach the front door without first trudging through a drift. He stomped his feet to remove the snow and gave the door knocker a sharp rap.
"Let's get this over with,"
he muttered under his breath. The door was opened by a girl perhaps a few years younger than John. He had never seen anyone so beautiful.
"Hello, may I help you, sir?"
John couldn't speak for a moment.
Yes, I'm John.
"John who?"
Newton. John Newton."
John had never been in love before, but at the sight of this girl, he knew he was now. He soon learned that the girl was Polly, the oldest Catlet girl. The Catlets invited John to stay with them as long as he wanted. John was happy to accept the offer, although he kept his feelings for Polly a secret. His quick visit ended up lasting 3 whole weeks. John knew he'd missed the ship leaving for Jamaica and the opportunity his father had arranged, but he didn't care. He didn't want to leave England, and he didn't want to be a sugar plantation owner. He wanted to be with Polly, and whatever John wanted was most important in his mind. John's father was furious when John finally returned home. Once again, he had ruined a carefully arranged opportunity. However, his father's anger soon gave way to another plan to see John succeed. This time, John was to sail the Adriatic Sea with another captain, a friend of John's father. However, John would be a common soldier, no special privileges. John set sail this time and soon learned to be an able seaman, but he also learned several sinful habits. Many of the sailors drank alcohol heavily and cursed one another and everything else. John wanted to be popular with the sailors, so he soon gave in to these temptations and joined in. When he returned to England at the end of the year, there was only one thought on his mind. When could he see Polly again?
"I don't understand why you want to visit the Catlets again so soon,"
his father said, as John sat once more before his desk. John didn't have an answer.
"Just make sure you're back in time to meet Mr. Dawes. He's looking for a few good men to serve as officers on his ship, and I've made arrangements for you to be one of them."
"Yes, Father."
This time John hurried as fast as he could to the Catlets' house. Although he still kept his feelings for Polly secret from her and her family, there was no mistaking them in his heart. And when it was time to leave, John ignored his responsibilities. Instead, he stayed with the Catlets for over a month. Still, there was one thing bothering John. He wanted to marry Polly one day, but how could he even think about it? He didn't have a job or position. Her family certainly wouldn't agree to it. One morning in March, John traveled alone to the nearby town of Chatham. The sea air always seemed to help him think better. As he slowly made his way down the main street, he kept thinking about his problem.
There has to be a way,
he muttered to himself.
Looks like this fellow's lost,
came a voice from behind him. John turned to see not one, but 3 men following him.
Seems like we might be able to help him. Don't you think, sir?
The question was directed to the leader of the group. John could tell by the man's blue jacket that he was an officer in the British Navy. The officer gave a faint smile before speaking.
I agree. I think this gentleman might be looking for an opportunity to serve on board the Harwich. Isn't that right, sir?
John realized what had happened. He'd been caught by a press gang. Press gangs were groups of men sent out by the Royal Navy to find new recruits for Navy ships. They had ways of convincing whoever they found to serve. With war about to begin with France, John had picked a poor time to walk alone on the streets of a port town. The 3 men led John to a building in town, where he was kept under lock and key for 3 days, while the men searched the streets for more volunteers. Word reached John's father about what had happened, but even his attempts to see John released ended in failure. John and the others were led on board the Harwich, where John would serve as a seaman. 4 days after he boarded the ship, war was declared with France. Soon the Harwich was sailing up and down the coast, providing protection for other British ships. Thanks to John's experience at sea and his father's influence, John was soon promoted to midshipman. That meant better food and treatment. But John soon wasted the opportunity. He treated the sailors under him with little care and was disrespectful to those in authority. One time, while the ship was in port, John was given permission to go on shore for 1 day. Instead, he took 10 days so he could visit the Catlets and see Polly again. When he finally returned, Captain Carteret was so upset that he threatened to demote John. After his meeting with the captain, one of the officers took John aside.
Look here, Newton. I don't think you realize how gracious Captain Carteret has been to you.
Yes, sir. Is that all?
John asked.
Is that all? Is that all? Newton, you should be grateful not to have received a good flogging.
John remained silent. The officer continued.
I'd advise you to change your attitude, or it's going to make the long voyage to the East Indies even more difficult for you and for us.
John looked up quickly.
What was that you said, sir? Voyage to where?
To the East Indies, Newton. Haven't you heard? We've been reassigned.
John couldn't believe it. The East Indies were halfway around the world. John knew that once they sailed, they would be gone from England for 4, maybe 5 years. There would be no way to see Polly. Throughout the next few months, John hatched a secret plan. To the surprise of everyone, it started with his being as helpful as possible. Whenever there was a task to be done, John was the first to volunteer. One of the officers caught John's attention one morning.
I must say, Newton, your turnaround is quite remarkable. Captain Carteret is pleased with your progress. He's even asked me to assign you to take 3 men and go ashore at Plymouth and get a few more supplies before we shove off.
Yes, sir. Right away, sir.
John said with a smile. This was the opportunity he had been looking for. John would run away. Plymouth was close enough to where his father was that he might reach him. If he pleaded with him, maybe his father would find another job for him that would allow him to be closer to Polly. The next day, John arrived on shore in the ship's longboat. While the other men loaded the boat, John disappeared in the shadows of the dock. He quickly changed clothes and then bargained with a farmer for the use of a horse. As quickly as he could, he raced off to find his father. At a split in the road, he pulled up on the reins. Now which way? He thought. John wished he knew the area better. There was no time to lose. They'd be looking for him soon. He'd have to guess. John raced down one of the roads. As he rounded the corner, he pulled up on the reins again. This time it wasn't a split in the road. It was a group of soldiers.
Ho now!
One of them called out.
Where are you headed so quickly?
John had to think fast.
I'm heading to Exeter to find a doctor. It's my wife. She's going to have a baby.
Heading to Exeter, are you? Better hurry.
John gave a sigh of relief and began to leave.
Except You won't find it down that road,
said the soldier.
Say you wouldn't be hurrying for another reason, would you? Maybe we should have a quick look in those bags of yours.
John was captured. By nightfall, he was back on board the Harwich under armed guard. The next morning, he was brought out before the entire crew. Captain Carteret spoke.
Let you men bear witness that this man has deserted His Majesty's ship, the Harwich. In doing so, he has shown disregard for His Majesty's authority and is subject to corporal punishment. Lieutenant, carry out the sentence.
John's shirt was removed and his arms lashed to an iron grating. There would be no escaping this punishment. A cat-o'-nine-tails was given by the captain to the lieutenant. John winced in pain as the lashing began.